What is going on, everybody? Been a diehard Pistons fan since '03 and eager to see this team getting back to playing winning basketball. The Detroit Pistons are back in action tonight for their second preseason game of the year. In this video, we'll talk about where you can watch it at, go through a list of a couple things that I am looking towards watching and noticing, and then just do some general preview stuff in the back half. So to kick things off, the Detroit Pistons are going to be on tonight against the Phoenix Suns at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now this game is a little bit different than all our other preseason games because this one is going to be played at the Breslin Center in East Lansing, the home of the Michigan State Spartans basketball team. This was a game that was kind of tossed onto the preseason calendar late. I'm assuming that this was probably something that Matt Ishbia kind of endorsed and set up, considering that Matt Ishbia, who is the owner of their opponent, the Phoenix Suns, was a Michigan State alumni and is an alumni. So I'd imagine that this is something that Ishbia probably went out of his way to set up. So this game is actually the reason why the Pistons and the Suns are, I believe, the only two teams in the NBA that have 5 preseason games instead of 4. So kind of just consider this one an add-in. Another thing to note is directly after this game, the Pistons will be going out to Phoenix to play against the Suns again, but in Phoenix later on this week. So we will see back-to-back preseason games against the Suns. So as far as tomorrow's matchup actually goes, a couple things that I am going to keep my eyes open for. The first one on the list is going to be the way that Bickerstaff manages his lineups. In the first preseason game against the Bucks, I thought it was very interesting that Bickerstaff only played 8 players in the first half of the game. That is almost a polar opposite of what we saw from Monty Williams last year, who very commonly was going 11 men deep. So it was very interesting and a bit surprising, especially considering it was a preseason game, that Bickerstaff did keep the lineups and rotations very short. Now, one caveat to that was that both Ausar Thompson, of course, who still isn't cleared, and Tobias Harris were not suited up for that game. So assuming once Tobias comes back, which will be quicker than Ausar, that he will be getting minutes for sure. And I'm interested to see if that means that maybe someone like Holland isn't getting minutes right away, or Tim Hardaway Jr. isn't getting minutes right away. Just going to be curious to see how they integrate Tobias into the rotations that they have been rolling out. Now, of course, Bickerstaff has talked about plenty of times that he is using the preseason to test out certain lineups and see what kind of gels together. But nevertheless, I thought it was a bit eye-catching that he did only go 8 guys deep in the first preseason game in the first half. And I'm really curious to see how that kind of changes going forward through these other preseason games, especially once Tobias gets back into the lineup, and even Ausar eventually, and then Clipman, who didn't play as well, even though I don't expect him to exactly be a part of the core rotation straight away, despite the promising signs of him that we have saw in the Summer League. So just curious to see how that all plays out. Also curious to see who he starts, especially if Tobias is back in the lineup, which I'm hoping he is, because that'll make it so that he'll most certainly start, and I'd assume that either Fontecchio or probably more likely Hardaway Jr. would not be a part of the starting lineup at that point. So the second thing that I kind of want to keep my eyes open towards is just if they keep that same energy that they played with, namely starting towards about the end of the first quarter last game. Anybody who watched that first preseason game against the Bucks could tell that the defensive intensity was higher than it was in a lot of regular season games last year. They were having really crisp rotations on that end of the floor. A lot of guys were amped up. We saw Cade block jump shots. We saw Holland getting steals. We saw a lot of different things on the defensive end of the floor. And despite it being a preseason game, it was a pretty promising sign. So I'm really interested to see if they do keep that same energy up, especially considering that they'll be in East Lansing, not in the LCA. Just going to be a bit curious to see how that vibe kind of plays out, because, man, it looked great against the Bucks the other night. So hoping that can stick around and kind of translate into the regular season as far as energy and defensive effort and camaraderie goes, because it really showcased itself in the first preseason game, and that was a good sign. So another third thing that I'm really looking forward towards, which probably isn't the biggest deal in the world or will tell us all of that much, but just something that I personally want to see for my own amusement, is if Holland gets any chances to guard Kevin Durant. I really have been surprised and impressed with Holland's ability on defense after seeing him in person. It's pretty crazy how just filled out and built and long and NBA ready he appears to be physically at 19 years old. So I just really want to see Ron Holland get a chance to go one-on-one with KD. I think that that'd be super fun to watch, especially because it's the preseason, because Kevin Durant isn't the type of guy who needs to be going 110% to get his shots off. Kevin Durant can do elite caliber moves to score the ball in the middle of his sleep. So even though it is the preseason, I think that if Holland gets a few ISO possessions to guard Kevin Durant, it could be super fun to watch because it would either result in a young, teachable rookie moment for Holland, or it would turn into a moment where Holland gets a shutdown stop on Kevin Durant, which, even though it's the preseason, would just be super fun to watch, all things considered. So definitely not going to be anything to take away from that if that does happen, or anything to write home about, but would just be amusing from my own perspective to see. And speaking of the Phoenix Suns have already played one preseason game that might give us a little bit of an idea of what their rotation might look like. The Pistons played their starters in their first preseason game anywhere from like 18 to 25 minutes, depending on the player. In the Suns' first preseason game, Kevin Durant had 14 minutes, Bradley Beal had 14 minutes, Devin Booker had 14 minutes, and that really shouldn't surprise any of us because the Phoenix Suns are a much more veteran and older team than the Pistons. So seeing their main players getting less minutes in preseason games really isn't that shocking. If you look towards their bench, their rookie Oso out of Marquette got 27 minutes. Their other rookie, Ryan Dunn, got 24 minutes. Grayson Allen played 21. Bull was getting some burn. Previous Piston Monty Morris was out there getting some run. Frank Kaminsky was getting some burn. So realistically, yeah, they were just kind of throwing anybody out there towards the back half of their first preseason game, and I would expect for it to be similar today against the Pistons. So wouldn't expect to see those guys like Booker and Durant out there for all too long beyond the first quarter. So if we do want to see that Ron Holland, Kevin Durant hypothetical matchup, it's probably going to happen in the first quarter. So let me know what you guys think. I'm super excited for another game tonight. If any of you all are in East Lansing and going out there, have fun. Should be a fun game. Pretty cool that they're able to do this. Hoping it's a good time for everybody. Definitely just excited to have Pistons basketball back. So hopefully it can be as good of a game as the first one was against the Bucks, because I had a lot more fun watching that game than most people do watching preseason basketball. And that's not because I'm just such a big fan or anything like that. It's because the Pistons themselves made it an entertaining game with their defensive intensity and just kind of all the new pieces already showcasing some pretty awesome stuff. So let me know what you guys think, and we'll catch up soon.